Woohoo! I made it. Lord have mercy. I'm having technical difficulties this morning. October coming in with a bang. I think this is my October surprise right here. Wow. Well, I'm glad to have everybody with me out there in the chat room this morning and have everybody in the lurkers room this morning and have everybody that's going to be viewing this later on Memorex. Wow. I'll tell you what, we just zoomed right on into October, haven't we? Here we are, the third day of October 2016 on a Monday. Here in Indiana, it's a little overcast this morning and it's cool. It's down in the 60s this morning. They say it's going to warm up in the 70s, but I'll believe it when I see it. Not a breeze blowing or nothing stirring out there today. We got a lot of news to cover. My goodness gracious, it's just been going wacko here in the last couple of days. We'll get started with it. The first one we have here is off of hotair.com. It says, breaking Supreme Court. Excuse me. Let me get a drink here. I think I swallowed a frog. Okay, it says, breaking Supreme Court denies Obama rehearing on U.S. versus Texas immigration fight. So this just came out this morning. It says the White House lost its fight executive order on immigration when the Supreme Court had 9 members, and it won't get a second chance with 8 remaining. Stay back in session, the High Court denied a hearing request in U.S. the biggest fight between Washington and the states on enforcement of immigration status. The Supreme Court refused Monday to reconsider Barack Obama's proposed overhaul of the nation's immigration system vote in June that blocked its implementation. The 8-member court order shut down the door on a plan that already seemed all but dead a few months ago. The court denied to wait until a 9th justice is confirmed and seated in order to rehear the case and possibly reverse its June decision. The High Court seldom agrees to rehear cases a second time, but it has on occasion done so when a justice's death or retirement leaves a vacancy that leads to a 4-4 tie. The court merely leaves the decision of the lower court intact and sets no national precedent. Normally, it takes 4 justices to agree on a I'm not sure how this is pronounced, certiorari request. If that's the case with rehearing requests, then it appears that one or more of the justices who agreed with the Obama administration decided against a rehearing. The original 4-4 vote counted as a loss, as it had the practical effect of upholding the Fourth Circuit's ruling that struck down the executive orders, although it carries no presidential weight otherwise. This decision leaves the loss in place and also leaves Obama and his activism with no tools left to intrude on legislative jurisdiction. In more good faith on this issue, rather than leveraging it for cheap demagoguery, he might have found a compromise with Congress. For that matter, if Obama cared about this issue apart from cheap augury, gosh, that's a tough one for me to pronounce, so he would have prioritized immigration reform while his party controlled Congress, rather than backing a useless and expensive stimulus package and the disastrous Obamacare legislation. He might have made himself and Democrats a lot more popular in midterm elections too. On Obama, he lost mostly by forfeit. And then there's an update to it. It says it closes the books for Obama, but our friend Hans Bader reminds me that it's not over yet. This case involved a temporary injunction. The larger case will still have to be heard unless the next administration moots it by canceling the executive orders. So there is that breaking news. And all these URLs, of course, are in the description of the video, so you can take a look at them and do any further research or anything you want to do. The next one we have here is off of regated.com. And it says, WikiLeaks October surprise still on for Tuesday. Yesterday, and there had been some talk over the weekend that it wasn't going to happen, that it had been postponed. But this came out, this is the latest and greatest that we have here. It says, reports stated on Sunday that WikiLeaks had canceled a balcony announcement by Julian Assange due to security concerns. However, the October surprise announcement will still take place, but security measures will be taken. According to a tweet posted by Jesse Rodriguez, the senior producer for MSNBC's Morning Joe, Assange will appear via video to speak instead of his initial planned balcony announcement. Assange, along with Sarah Harrison, Melinda Taylor, and John Goetz, will appear on Tuesday at 10 o'clock CEST, 8 o'clock UTC, 9 o'clock BST, or 3 o'clock EST, 3 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Oh, let's see. It goes on. It says, this may be the October surprise that Assange promised would shake up the already chaotic presidential race. We wrote a piece about such impending threats toward her campaign. The October surprise may be as dangerous as Assange makes it out to be. Donald Trump surrogate Roger Stone made a comment on a tweet that reads, Wednesday at Hillary Clinton is done. This could very well be what Assange was alluding to in interviews last month. Assange vowed WikiLeaks would publish documents on Clinton before Election Day. Updates on the event to be posted on the WikiLeaks Facebook page. So there's that information for you. The next one that we have here is under intense pressure to silence WikiLeaks Secretary of State Clinton proposed drone strike on Julian Assange. Julian Assange and his free speech brainchild WikiLeaks were once global heroes of public service among United States politicians and policymakers. But by 2010, 4 years after its inception, during the President George W. Bush administration, Assange and his organization were no longer considered lovable troublemakers and mavericks. A year into President Barack Obama's first term, WikiLeaks was suddenly considered an out-of-control free speech Frankenstein, wreaking havoc on United States foreign policy and intelligence gathering at the direction of Assange, its proverbial. The honeymoon for the whistleblowing website, once a darling of the Democratic Party, was now over. Even more alarming, Assange's personal safety and organization were increasingly at risk from the U.S. concerns. By November 2010, Assange was a household name globally, but especially on Capitol Hill and in the State Department alone. His prowess of releasing otherwise secret, damning military documents and emails were filling conference rooms at Foggy Bottom and the White House with policy wonks and bureaucrats desperately seeking to squelch the upstart WikiLeaks. At the State Department, meeting after meeting was conducted about how Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and her inner circle were going to squash Assange and WikiLeaks' last planned in the United States, deemed Cablegate. Assange planned to release confidential cables or communications unveiling damaging internal conversations between State Department personnel and its foreign assets and allies. Prodding by the looming Cablegate, Clinton met with staff on Tuesday, November 23, 2010, shortly after 8 a.m. on Mahogany Row at State Department to attempt to formulate a strategy to avert Assange plans to release an enormous batch of 250,000 secret cables dating from 1966 to 2010, professed for months to rain the internal cables down on Clinton and President Obama. The collective fear was the context of the secret cables would hamper U.S. intelligence gathering and compromise private correspondence and intelligence shared with foreign governments and opposition leaders, splashing such juicy details on television news shows and the front pages of major newspapers in the country was great for the media, but lousy for intelligence and foreign policy. Many, including Clinton and her elected boss, expressed fear these revelations would embarrass and expose intelligent allies of the United States and set America's already fragile foreign policy back decades. By its very nature, Washington is candid and often incomplete information, White House Press Secretary Robert Gibbs said in a statement responding to WikiLeaks' anticipated tidal wave release of intelligence. It's not an expression of policy, nor does it always shape final policy decisions. Clinton's State Department was getting pressure from President Obama and his White House inner circle, as well as heads of state internationally, to try and cut off Assange's delivery of the cables. And if that effort failed, then to forge a strategy to minimize the administration's public embarrassment over the contents of the cables. Hence, Clinton's early morning November meeting of state top brass, who floated various proposals to stop, slow, or spin the WikiLeaks contamination. That is when frustrated Clinton, sources said at some point, blurted out a controversial query. Can't we just drone this guy? Clinton openly inquired, offering a simple remedy to silence Assange and smother WikiLeaks via a planned military drone strike, according to the State Department sources. The statement drew laughter from the room, which quickly died off when Secretary kept talking in a tense manner, sources said. Clinton said Assange, after all, was a relatively soft target, walking around freely and thumbing his nose without any fear of reprisals from the United States. Clinton was upset about Assange's previous 2010 records release, divulging secret U.S. documents about the war in Afghanistan in July and the war in Iraq just months earlier in October, sources said. At that time, in 2010, Assange, relatively free and not living cloistered in the embassy of Ecuador in London. Prior to 2010, Assange focused WikiLeaks efforts on countries outside the United States, but now under Clinton and Obama, Assange was hammering America with unparalleled third sweeping WikiLeaks document dump in 5 months. Clinton was fuming, sources said, at each State Department cable dispatch during the Obama administration was signed by her. Clinton and other top administration officials knew the compromising materials warehoused in the Cablegate stash and foreign enemies with treasure trove of counterintelligence. Bureaucratic fears about Cablegate release ultimately proved to be well-founded by Clinton, her inner circle, and her boss in the White House. The revelations of these U.S. diplomat-generated correspondences were damaging on many levels, and among thousands of examples included one cable detailed a discussion between Yemeni President Ali Abdullah Saleh and General David H. Petraeus, where Saleh indicated he would cover up and accept blame for America's missile strikes against al-Qaeda in Yemen. Diplomats offered various countries a meeting with President Obama and untold millions of dollars if these countries agreed to accept detainees from the Guantanamo Bay prison. U.S. diplomats engaged in low-level spying by collecting foreign diplomats' personal information, including credit card numbers, to track their global travel itineraries. The cables also exposed the sensitive behind-the-scenes diplomacy involved in winning sanctions against Iran. The cables exposed U.S. officials' plan to extract highly enriched uranium from Pakistan. Intelligence was divulged on North Korea's ties to Tehran's weaponry program, how it helped Iran obtain missiles that could strike Moscow and Western European cities. Documents were released naming Arab officials and their concerns and complaints about Iran's nuclear program. One such leak detailed King Abdullah of Saudi Arabia pleading with the United States to cut off the heads of the snake, meaning Iran's nuclear program. In cables from U.S. diplomats, Russian Prime Minister Vladimir Putin is described as an alpha dog. Afghan President Hamad Karzai, confidential U.S. diplomat correspondence alleged, was driven by paranoia. German Chancellor Angela Merkel avoids risk and is rarely creative. Gaddafi spends much time in public with a voluptuous blonde Ukrainian nurse. Silvio Berlusconi, the Italian prime minister, appears increasingly to be mouthpiece of Putin in Europe after receiving lavish gifts, including large energy contracts, thanks to the negotiations of a shadowy Russian-speaking Italian intermediary, and thousands more of additional intelligence revelations along the same lines. Following Clinton's alleged drone proposal, another controversial remedy that was floated in the State Department to place a reward or bounty on Assange's capture and extradition to the United States, sources said. Numbers were discussed in the realm of $10 million bounty. A State Department source described that staff meeting as bizarre. One minute, staffers were inquiring about Secretary's blue and black checkered knit sweater, and in the next minute, the room was discussing the legalities of a drone strike on Assange and financial bounties, sources said. Immediately following the conclusion of the wild brainstorming session, one of Clinton's top aides, State Department Director of Policy Planning Anne Marie Slaughter, penned an email to Clinton Chief of Staff Cheryl Mills and aides Huma Abedin and Jacob Sullivan at 10:29 a.m. entitled an SP memo on possible legal and non-legal strategies regarding WikiLeaks. Non-legal strategies? How did that phrasing make it into the official State Department email subject line dealing with solving WikiLeaks and Assange? Why would the Secretary of State and her inner circle be discussing any non-legal strategies for anything whatsoever against anyone? Shouldn't all strategies discussed by the country's top diplomat be strictly legal only? And is the email a smoking gun to confirm Clinton was actually serious about pursuing an obvious non-legal strategy proposal to allegedly assassinate Assange? Numerous attempts were made to try to interview and decipher Slaughter's choice of email wording. However, she could not be reached for comment. Insiders said Slaughter is keeping a low profile in Princeton, New Jersey until she is nominated for a position in Clinton's cabinet if the Democrat is elected in November. Likewise, True Pundit attempted to contact Mills, Abedin, and Sullivan for their perspectives on this story. None commented on the record. And this goes on and on and on. So, you can read the rest of it for yourself, but I think you get the gist of this. Holy smoke. They should just change her name to Teflon, because nothing sticks. No matter what comes out on her, she slides right off of it, doesn't she? Wow. The next one we have here is off of westernjournalism.com. As Judge Napolitanto, FBI was told to exonerate Hillary at all cost to run against Trump. Well, that kind of explains it, don't it? While Hillary Clinton was busy suggesting Donald Trump is hiding something in his taxes, Clinton says, why won't he release his tax returns? First, maybe he's not as rich as he says he is. Second, maybe he's not as charitable as he claims to be. I have no reason to believe that he's ever going to release his tax returns because there's something he's hiding. Judge Napolitanto said the FBI helped hide Clinton's crimes to keep her in the presidential race. And he says here, why the FBI would look the other way in the face of destruction of evidence and obstruction of justice is very telling. It tells me, and those of us that watch these things, that somewhere from above the White House, they were told, exonerate her at all costs, no matter what you see, because she's got to be available to run against Donald Trump. The evidence that the FBI has revealed since Director Comey's statement, we're not going to request an indictment, which happened on July the 5th, 2 months ago, has been so damning than what we knew about the case beforehand. A lot of Americans are unsatisfied with the result of the FBI investigation because they know that a lot of people have been prosecuted for these crimes, and there's a lot of them. Espionage, perjury, misleading Congress, destruction of evidence, obstruction of justice. A lot of Americans have been prosecuted for these crimes with a lot less evidence than they had about Mrs. Clinton. we have is off of 100%fedup.com. Oops. List of 10 corporate tax dodgers are Hillary's donors. Compliments of Bernie Sanders. Says the hypocrisy of our media is astounding. What about Hillary's major corporate donors like GE, for example, that have been working the loopholes in the tax system for decades? Does anyone care that Hillary has been taking money from some of America's biggest corporate tax dodgers for several years? Bernie Sanders recently outed the 10 biggest multinational corporations that paid no federal taxes for at least 1 year between 2008 and 2012. Sanders has made corporate tax dodgers a key point of his presidential platform. In recent press release, Sanders' campaign laid out the Vermont senator's plans to force multinational corporations to pay their fair share in taxes. As it turns out, all 10 of these same companies are some of Hillary Clinton's biggest donors, whether to her campaign or to her family foundation. The first one is General Electric, according to data from the nonpartisan group Citizens for Tax Justice. GE posted $33.9 billion in U.S. profits, yet somehow got $2.9 billion in refunds that same time period. According to the book, Clinton Cash, then Secretary of State Clinton, lobbied the Algerian government for a GE power plant contract after Algeria awarded the contract to GE. Jeffrey Emmett, CEO of GE, gave a donation to the Clinton Foundation. Sanders also pointed out that while Emmett sat on the board of the New York Federal Reserve, the Fed gave GE $16 billion in financial assistance. Second one's Boeing. Boeing is one of the nation's biggest corporate tax dodgers, making over $20 billion in profits between 2008 and 2012 and paying an overall income tax rate of negative 1% during those years. Clinton author Peter Schweitzer, Jared Clinton successfully lobbied the Russian government to enter into a $3.7 billion contract to buy Boeing aircraft. The aerospace company gave the Clinton Foundation a hefty donation of $900,000. Number 3 is Verizon. In 4 years between 2008 and 2012, Verizon pocketed over $30 billion in profits and paid a tax rate of negative 1.8%, according to CTJ. The Sanders campaign research claims that in 2012 alone, Verizon would have paid $630 million in income tax, and they had been unable to stash U.S. profits in offshore havens. Verizon has given between $118,000 and $300,000 to the Clinton Foundation in recent years, and as Zaid Jalani reported in Alternet last year, Hillary Clinton is the favored candidate of numerous Verizon executives, many of whom have given the maximum donation to her 2016 effort. Verizon Vice President Kathleen Grillo and Donna Epps each gave $2,700 to Hillary for America. Verizon Senior Vice President Thomas Edwards and Vice President Chris DeBoser pitched in $1,000. Lisa Eve, former Hillary staffer who today is lobbyist for Verizon, gave $2,700. Another Verizon lobbyist, David Dola, gave Hillary $1,000. To contrast, Sanders appeared at a rally for striking Verizon workers in the New York City last year, demanding the company meet the workers' demands and admonishing its executives for the company's greedy practices. Fourth one is the Bank of America. In 2010, Bank of America got a whopping $1.9 billion refund from IRS despite making $4.4 billion in profit. And the Institute for Policy Studies reported that the Bank of America has over 300 foreign subsidiaries in countries and territories universally known as tax havens, like Cayman Islands and Bermuda. In his recent groundbreaking report for The Intercept, Jelani reported that the Bank of America paid Hillary Clinton $225,000 in speaking fees after her tenure as Secretary of State. Citigroup. Citigroup has the largest recipient, or was the largest recipient of federal bailout money, getting an astonishing $2.5 trillion after the financial crisis, even though they played a major role in financial meltdown. Citi also paid zero in federal income taxes in 2010, despite making profits in excess of $4 billion. Had the bank been unable to utilize offshore tax havens, it would have paid $11.5 billion in federal taxes in 2012. According to campaign finance database OpenSecrets.org, Citigroup is Hillary Clinton's top donor, having given her over $824,000 in campaign contributions throughout her political career. Number 6 is Pfizer. The Connecticut-based pharmaceutical giant is notorious for tax avoidance strategies, paying zero in federal income tax between 2010 and 2012 and getting $2.2 billion tax refund despite posting $43 billion in global profits. Pfizer executives gave nearly $40,000 to Clinton's presidential campaign between April and September of 2015, and Pfizer itself has given between $1 million and $5 million to the Clinton Foundation, according to donor records obtained by the Washington Times. FedEx. In 2012, FedEx made $2.7 billion in profits, yet they were given $135 million tax refund from the IRS that same year. FedEx also receives $1 billion a year in corporate welfare from the U.S. Post Office, its chief competitor, to use its aircraft to transport U.S. mail. FedEx has given anywhere between $100,000 and $250,000 to the Clinton Foundation. The company was also one of 4 corporations to bundle a $2.5 million donation to Clinton's new diplomacy center. Boeing was another. Number 8 is Honeywell. Despite making over $3 billion in combined profits between 2009 and 2010, Honeywell paid zero in federal income taxes and got roughly $510 million in refunds. Honeywell CEO David Cote was also one of the loudest voices on the FedEx, on the Fix the Debt campaign, calling for the Social Security and Medicare age to be raised to 70 years old. Honeywell, a prominent weapons manufacturer, also gave $50,000 to Clinton Foundation while Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State. At the same time, Honeywell and others had their weapons shipped to countries blasted by international watchdogs for their deplorable records on human rights. Number 9 is Merck. Merck's one of the nation's largest pharmaceutical companies and biggest tax dodgers. In 2009, Merck pocketed $5.7 billion in profits, yet paid zero in federal taxes. Merck successfully got out of paying $18.69 billion in federal taxes in 2012 by stashing $53.4 billion of its U.S. profits in overseas tax havens. The Center for Responsive Politics reports that Merck donated between $250,000 and $500,000 to the Clinton Foundation after becoming a member of the Clinton Global Initiative in 2006. It also spent millions on lobbying the U.S. State Department during Hillary Clinton's tenure as Secretary of State. Number 10 is Corning. CTJ reports that between 2008 and 2012, Corning made over $3.4 billion in profits and got a $10 million tax refund, paying 0.1% federal tax rate. Sanders' campaign pointed out that Corning CEO Wendell Weeks has called for the retirement age to be raised to 70, while he himself has a $22.8 million retirement account. While Clinton headed up the State Department, Corning lobbied heavily for multiple policies on which it stood to reap financial gains, including the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Clinton in turn lobbied China to lower tariffs on the type of goods manufactured by Corning. The company has also donated between $100,000 and $250,000 to the Clinton Foundation and paid the former Secretary of State $225,000 in speaking fees after she announced her presidential campaign. I can't make this stuff up. She has the audacity to stand there in the debate and berate Trump for not paying taxes. And yet, look at what her contributors are doing for her campaign. I don't see her berating them. Off of WND.com. America's last election It says, I agree with Jim Dobson about the importance of November's presidential election. Last month, he made an impassioned appeal to attendees of the Family Research Council's Value Voters Summit to support Donald Trump, like our very lives depended on it. I am passionately in favor of Donald Trump, Dobson said. Donald Trump is not a perfect man. There aren't any perfect people. There aren't any. If you are waiting for a perfect candidate, you're not going to have anybody to vote for. I lose sleep thinking about having Hillary Clinton pack that court with people from the far left and what that would mean for the institution of the family. Dobson went on to say that someone suggested it would take 40 years for America to recover from 4 or 8 years of Hillary Clinton presidency, and I disagree with that. We won't ever recover from it, he said emphatically. We will go down in flames, maybe literally, if we put the wrong person in power. Dobson said he was inclined to retire, but the Lord has his hands on his back and told him to put the idea out of his mind. This is not a time to quit, he repeated often in his remarks. Donald Trump hasn't got a chance at winning without good people going out and voting for him, Dobson concluded. Understand this is a time when our whole country hangs in the balance, and I am convinced that we will never come back from a bad decision here. What Dobson said resonates in my soul. It's not hyperbole, it's as some have suggested. I lived through 8 years of the Clinton administration, and I know Bill and Hillary are more dangerous in many ways than even Barack Obama, who has successfully accomplished his mission of fundamentally transforming America. Why are the Clintons scarier? During the last 8 years, I have watched in horror as Obama has defied the Constitution, abused his executive power, and subverted the rule of law. I've watched him actively divide people by race and class and demonize those who disagree with him as racists and bigots. The inevitable Internal Revenue Service audits and watched in shock as Republicans did nothing to hold him accountable. In fact, I watched as they rolled over and authorized Obama to borrow and spend endlessly to his heart's content. 8 years, I never once feared for my life because Obama was president. To the 1990s and tell you what it was like being a dissident, a critic, a political adversary of Bill and Hillary Clinton. Yes, you could expect to be audited, but that was just the warning shot. People like me who investigated and exposed the Clinton administration scandals could expect much, much worse. Officers were broken into, some were harassed in their homes, pets were killed, threats were made, careers were ruined, and some died under mysterious circumstances. Can be sure it will be worse if they are allowed back into power. Expect a scorched earth policy. I don't see how America could, well, we got something trying to play here. We'll get that shut off. I'm trying to shut it off. There we go. Expect a scorched earth policy. I don't see how America could survive as anything remotely reminiscent of self-governing free society. If Hillary wins, we're done. Many don't agree. They believe America is here to stay. They have no concept of time. They don't realize what a brief experiment in liberty our nation really represents. Let me explain how brief. My mother died this year at the age of 91. That means she was alive for more than a third of America's history. For instance, someone born in 1924 likely knew people who were alive through the Civil War. It could have been a grandparent or great or just a family friend. If that person lived to be 90 years old, he or she would have lived through the American Revolution. 3 generations, that's how long America has been around, from the founding through 2016. It's really not that long. It's more like a blink of an eye. The experiment in liberty is still very young by history standards. That's why you should vote in this election like your life depends on it, because something even more precious does, the life of American liberty. The next one that we have here is off of the AmericanUpdater.com. It says, breaking, close all stores. The reason why is heartbreaking. says, with over 500 locations in 41 states, Hobby Lobby is one of the most popular stores in America. However, the brand has become controversial in the last few years since it refused to back down from its strong Christian beliefs. Liberals have been trying to shut down Hobby Lobby for years, but the chain has always remained strong until now. To American News, Hobby Lobby founder and CEO David Green just released an open letter explaining that he may need to close all of his stores, and here's the full letter. My family and I started our company 40 years ago. We were working out of a garage on a $600 bank loan, assembling miniature picture frames. Our first retail store wasn't much bigger than most people's living rooms, but we had faith that we would succeed if we lived and worked according to God's word. From there, Hobby Lobby has become one of the nation's largest arts and crafts retailers with more than 500 locations in 41 states. Our children grew up into fine business leaders, and today we run Hobby Lobby together as a family. We're Christians, and we run our business on Christian principles. I've always said that the first two goals of our business are, number one, to run our business in harmony with God's laws, and number two, to focus on people more than money, and that's what we've tried to do. We close early so our employees can see their families at night. We keep our stores closed on Sundays, one of the week's biggest shopping days, so that our workers and their families can enjoy a day of rest. We believe that it is by God's grace that Hobby Lobby has endured and has blessed us and our employees. We've not only added jobs in a weak economy, we've raised wages for the past 4 years in a row. Our full-time employees start at 80% above minimum wage, but now our government threatens to change all of that. A new government healthcare mandate says that our family business must provide what I believe are abortion-causing drugs as part of our health insurance. Being Christians, we don't pay for drugs that might cause abortions, which means that we don't cover emergency contraception, the morning after pill, or the week after pill. We believe doing so might end a life after the moment of conception, something that is contrary to our most important beliefs. It goes against biblical principles on which we have run this company since day one. If we refuse to comply, we could face $1.3 million per day in government fines. Our government threatens to find job creators in a bad economy. Our government threatens to find a company that's raised wages 4 years running. Our government threatens to fine a family for running its business according to its beliefs. It's not right. I know people will say we ought to follow the rules. The same for everybody, but that's not true. The government has exempted thousands of companies from this mandate for reasons of convenience or cost, but it won't exempt them for reasons of religious belief. So Hobby Lobby and my family are forced to make a choice. With great reluctance, we filed a lawsuit today represented by the Becker Fund for Religious Liberty, asking a federal court to stop this mandate before it hurts our business. We don't like to go running into court, but we no longer have a choice. We believe people are more important than the bottom line, and that more important than turning a profit. My family has lived the American dream. We want to continue growing our company and providing great jobs for thousands of employees, but the government is going to make that much, much more difficult. The government is forcing us to choose between following our faith and following the law. I say that's a choice no American business should have to make. The government cannot force you to follow laws that go against your fundamental religious belief. They have exempted thousands of companies, but will not accept Christian organizations, including the Catholic Church. Since you will not see this in the liberal media, please pass this on to all your contacts. Sincerely, David Green, CEO and founder of Hobby Lobby Stores Incorporated. That information on Hobby Lobby. And then we have a breaking story here about Pepsi just announced possibly the largest scam in modern history, and it's bad. Pepsi, the owner of Aquafina Water, just announced what may be one of the biggest scams in recent history. Aquafina Water, which most believe to be spring water or even purified water, is in actuality water. Newsbake.com reported as people have become more informed regarding what's in the water they drink, they have begun drinking bottled water to avoid the fluoride and pharmaceuticals that are in normal tap water. We are now learning that bottled water does not take care of this problem, since the companies are simply bottling tap water. PepsiCo Representative Michelle Naughton said in a statement, "If this helps clarify the fact that the water originates from public sources, then it's a reasonable thing to do. We don't believe that consumers are confused about the source of Desante water. The label clearly states it's purified water." Coca-Cola spokesman Diana Carlante said. More companies are sure to come out and admit truth what they are putting in the water, but in the meantime, be sure to tell all your friends and family so that they can avoid this. So now we know Aquafina comes from the tap. The next one we have is off of concerneduspatriots.com. And this says, martial law. When the elite makes food scarce, a fearful, traumatized population by the thousands and perhaps millions will seek food, shelter, and protection any way they can, easily led to the slaughterhouse. Some dismiss it as fear porn and incessantly pumped out on the internet, constantly warning Americans that dictator Obama has sinister design to create a national crisis in order to declare martial law as a means of canceling November's election and thereby staying in power. Of course, that kind of conspiracy theory speculation has only been fueled by this summer's rise of alleged terrorist attacks and staged mass shootings, skyrocketing both in America and across the globe. After the bloodiest Ramadan month on record, near daily terrorist attacks and mass killings are now striking Germany, France, Sweden, and Japan like never before. The latest victim was an elderly priest, his throat slashed in a Catholic church by an electronic ankle bracelet wearing ISIS terrorist in sleepy French village in Normandy. A Japan knife-wielding killer on a rampage murdered 19 mentally disabled people and wounded 45 more, calling in mercy killing for their overburdened caregivers. This year, the globalists have been working overtime, stepping up Western state-sponsored terrorism attacks around the globe, using their Islamic jihadists and deranged extremists as their regular go-to patsies. The hundreds of terrorist cells embedded in the millions of migrating refugees still pouring into Europe and America have Merkel and Obama still welcoming them with open arms, just as their puppet masters pulling their strings demand, while the entire world knows it's reaping disastrous consequences. Yet the madness, turpitude, and destruction committed at the highest levels of power every day are impervious to the will of the people and immune from any real accountability. In America, the globalists have been especially busy employing Soros-funded groups like MoveOn.org, Black Lives Matter, and Color of Change to incite chaos, confusion, and tension, especially along a racial divide through distortion and lies. Meanwhile, Islamic State terrorists and MS-13 gangsters have infiltrated America's 8-year unprotected border with intent to create violence and terror. The results promote race wars, religious wars, a war between foreign migrants, a war between foreign immigrants and Americans, as well as the war between an increasingly hostile federal government and angry citizen patriots feeling betrayed by Washington. Puppet Obama has faithfully carried out his Manchurian orders by design, leaving America wide open and defenseless, just like his European counterparts, Merkel and Hollande. A culture of international mob rule, fanatical extremism, and militant PC rigidity and intolerance have killed free speech, leaving the nation fragmented, zombified, and mentally, economically, and politically unstable. For decades, U.S. law enforcement from the federal to local level has been trained and primed for combat readiness to wage war against its own citizens under the pretext to quell the civil uprising and volatility about to boil over. Additionally, arming 70 federal civilian agencies in footsteps of militarized police within the EPA and FDA, the IRS, the Fish and Wildlife Department, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, Department of Veterans Affairs, and even the U.S. Postal Service and Social Security Administration, after buying up 6 billion rounds of lethal hollow point bullets, speaks volumes on how Obama's leading Americans to the proverbial democide slaughterhouse. 8 years ago, while campaigning for president, the Senator Barack Obama made this statement: "We cannot continue to rely on our military in order to achieve the national security objectives we've set. We've got to have a civilian national security force that's just as powerful, just as strong, just as well funded." And though just prior to uttering those words, Obama spoke of doubling the size of the Peace Corps and near quadrupling AmeriCorps, the then presidential candidate was drawing upon his experience as Chicago community organizer, but Obama's youthful past also indicates he is steeped in ideological indoctrination by the likes of a communist sympathizing, oft debating biological father, Frank Marshall Davis, as well as weather underground terrorist Bill Ayers. So in 2008, candidate Obama, envisioning exponential growth under his presidential watch of the deep security state, controls apparatus home security state and municipal fusion centers, an expanding army of private security civilian contractors and swelling militarized civilian police force should not come as a surprise to anyone at all. And now that many of us realize that Barack Hussein Obama rode in on a Trojan horse, preying on America's hopes, the damage he has inflicted on our nation is both grave and severe. But with a few more months still left prior to the end of his second term in office, a growing number of Americans are seeing that the shit is just now hitting the fan, and the worst is yet to come. In 2016, presidential campaign has thoroughly exposed the corrupt and rancid two-party political system in America, where citizens' votes don't matter at all. The game's been electronically rigged ever since George W.'s 2 stolen elections at the start of this century. Recently hacked DNC emails have stripped crime boss Hillary naked as a jaybird, gradually to the public rendering despite AG Loretta Lynch's elite ordered pardons from serving any jail time. While recent polls are showing Trump ahead of the blood-soaked Clinton duo, the race to foment and cause open rebellion and violent civil disturbance in the U.S. before the fall of the election, or before the fall election, has the summer of chaos in full swing now. Government staged police shootings has both victims and murderers in Dallas, Baton Rouge, Tennessee, Minnesota, timed with 2 presidential convention fiascos, reveal a highly splintered, polarized, confused, and upset nation like never before. If yet another election is stolen and Hillary cheats, backstabs, and plunders her way into the presidency, expect an armed rebellion from the American people. If Trump somehow ends up elected, the elite will engineer a series of false flag crises that will also induce open revolt. If Trump surges in the polls and remains highly favored from here on out, increasing the odds that we may not see an election in November at all. Obama and his minions will be sure to orchestrate a national crisis leading to martial law and his continued reign in terror. A few months ago, I wrote a couple of articles exposing how the ruling elite has been systematically turning Americans and the world against each other, increasingly deploying its centuries-old tried and true divide and conquer tactics to tighten its status quo noose of getting away with mass murder. The globalist age-old winning formula has never been more apparent than it is today. As their Ponzi schemed global economy begins imploding on itself, starting with the Deutsche Bank, Europe's largest central bank, about to spread the collapsing domino effect, the Western oligarchs are rapidly moving to ignite World War III against Eastern powers, Russia, China, and Iran. A plethora of incendiary hotspots are all timed and primed to explode on a moment's notice. It could be in the South China Sea, anywhere along the heavily armed 3,000-mile Eastern European Russian border, the Arctic, Ukraine, Yemen, or Nagorno-Karabakh, just to name a few. But Erdogan, sitting on the largest stockpile of NATO nukes at Incirlik Air Base, and all that's not even counting what may well become America's second Civil War. This presentation will focus on the latter hotspot heating up right here in American soil. A year ago, last summer, Jade Helm operation, many patriots reacted with grave concern, myself included, to the largest military exercise in U.S. history carried out by special forces, the FBI, Homeland Security, and law enforcement across the entire southern tier of the United States from Florida to California. That unprecedented 3-month military drill ended up merely the PSYOPs dry run beta test for what's still to come, just as the Boston Marathon false flag was used to launch the first large-scale U.S. city lockdown as martial law. When then feared FEMA camp roundups didn't occur during Jade Helm, as hyped on the internet, Chicken Little conspiracy theorists screamed the loudest, had been set up by the feds, tagged with boy who cried wolf syndrome, and discredited as not to be believed, overly paranoid fringe element. After Y2K, the Mayan 2012 non-event, and last year's no big deal Jade Helm, relatively few U.S. citizens are worried about any American Civil War or World War III breaking out, or the end of the world as we know it. By premeditated design, the Jade Helm PSYOPs conditioned Americans to go back to sleep, letting complaints and apathy once again set in. While the outed tinfoil crowd still crying martial law is coming, mocked by both MSM and mainstream America, this summer, the U.S. populace might be too busy, entertained, and preoccupied by the CIA-treated Pokemon Go and political circus theater. This is exactly where the ruling elite wants us, too dumbed down and obviously too divided to notice anything else. That said, at the same time, more of us who pay attention are recognizing some very dire warning signs blasting at us with unprecedented fury. Two ominously foreboding developments have been unfolding in recent months with little to no attention by either mainstream or alternative news media. For the first time in history, or in American history, the sitting president has just signed an executive order authorizing U.S. military to use violence to kill U.S. citizens. The name of the executive order is the United States Policy on Pre- and Post-Strike Measures to Address Civilian Casualties in U.S. Operation involving the involving the use of force. It was quietly signed by Obama on July the 1st, 2016. According to the White House fact sheet, the executive order's intent specifies whether or not one accepts the Obama administration's drone policy rationale, it has important implications for civilians because the U.S. sees itself in an armed conflict against terrorist groups, not conventional armies. Throughout the world, there are no clear geographic limits to this conflict or the civilian population affected by it. The conflict is wherever Al-Qaeda or its affiliated groups are, and capture is deemed unfeasible. The conditions of war can follow terrorists as they move even into areas without active hostilities. U.S. drone strikes have resulted in civilian injuries, death, and trauma. Obama's executive order perhaps mitigates these risks, but does not eliminate them. At the end of the day, the U.S. government chooses to accept a certain level of risk to civilian lives when conducting drone strikes against suspected terrorists. Through the overt purpose of the order, it is meant to articulate in explicit terms rules of engagement regarding civilians in or outside combat zones, emphasizing the over and above extra measures the U.S. military meticulously takes to minimize civilian casualties as collateral damage. Absolute protection and safety of civilian populations in America's war on terror obviously cannot be guaranteed, nor can civilian loss of life be prevented. In response to the recent flack over significant number of reported civilian deaths in Syria, 73 killed by U.S. airstrikes, said to be the most victims ever in 2-year U.S.-led coalition war against ISIS. However, French jets are believed to have killed just over 120 non-combatants during the same days. The incensed Syrian foreign minister, in a formal complaint sent to the UN, accuses the U.S. of intentionally slaughtering Syrians, many of whom were women and children, insisting that 30 repeated airstrikes in a couple of days, killing so many innocent civilians, cannot be mere accident. visibly flustered and annoyed Pentagon spokesman, retired Admiral John Kirby, refused to even answer questions asked by the RT network correspondent. She raised the questions of U.S. coalition formula that allowed for a certain number of innocent deaths based on perceived value of an enemy target. Another State Department representative had previously confirmed the existence of such cold-hearted calculation that debases human life to a mathematical kill ratio formula. That's how the psychopathic U.S. empire has always operated in war, totaling up to 30 million innocent lost lives sacrificed since World War II by the U.S. killing machine, and the remote desensitized aspect of a drone operator sitting comfortably in a darkened, air-conditioned office half a world away from the killing field, somehow takes on the flavor of a video game and offers a cleaner, more acceptable detachment from one's conscience, and its creepy stealth resonates so well with our commander-in-chief that his favorite brand of modern warfare. And this goes on. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I've only maybe a quarter through it. But, I mean, Lord have mercy. If that don't tell you something, I don't know what does. You can read the rest of it at your leisure. The next one here is off of freerangereport.com. One is about Feds raid Wyoming farmers market, order legal food destroyed. I mean, I had to read this myself 3 times because I couldn't believe it. But this is what's going on. I mean, this is sort of like the issues with the BLM taking over people's land. You know, they don't have the right to do that. Well, the feds do not have the right to shut down a farmer's market. The farmers markets are state run. It says federal agents have raided a farmer's market in Gillette, Wyoming, ordering one seller to destroy his homemade chili or have it confiscated, even though the product was fully legal under state law that has been described as an economy-boosting giant cottage foods bill. The details of the confrontation between local food producers and agents of the United States Department of Agriculture have been reported by the activist Farm to Consumer Legal Defense Fund. The group's Pete Kennedy reported on a precedent-setting law adopted by Wyoming in 2015 to cut through red tape that Washington now applies to those who want to sell food products directly to their neighbors and acquaintances. The Wyoming Food Freedom Act has been cited as an example of what states should do to allow cottage industry production to flourish, as it allows virtually unlimited sales of food from farms, ranches, and private home kitchens. Many states allow cottage food as long as they are non-potentially hazardous foods, such as meat, which has time and temperature requirements to limit pathogenic microorganism growth or toxin formation. The Wyoming law still bans most meats, but contains an exclusion for poultry, requiring only that the seller advise the buyer that the product is not inspected. Kennedy said the law simply returns Wyoming to previous precedents. Before the 20th century, farmers were scarcely regulated, if at all. Towns may have required licenses for farmers selling and peddling the products of the farm, but licensing was for purposes of raising revenues only, not to be a mandate to conduct inspections. It shouldn't be any different today. The model law now could become a test in court. Farm to Consumer Legal Defense Fund said because of the September 21st raid by the USDA's Food Safety and Inspection Service on the Wyoming farmers market. The agents ordered one vendor to dispose of food prepared for sale, John Moody reported at the Farm to Market website. The USDA actions are puzzling, given that since the Wyoming Food Freedom Act passed, there have been no reported or documented increases in foodborne illnesses or other problems in the state on account of it, in spite of dire warnings and predictions to the contrary. He continued, what has happened is an explosion of small-scale artisanal and home farm-based businesses among the people of Wyoming, a boon to growers and markets, and an example for the rest of the nation as to what a decentralized self-regulated local food system can do to improve food quality, safety, and affordability around the nation while helping to rebuild communities and economies at the local and state levels. He reported on that day, 3 suspected USDA agents showed up at the farmers market in Gillette, Wyoming, and harassed vendors operating under the Wyoming Food Freedom Action. Had produced food in accordance with the act and were operating solely in the state of Wyoming. Moody's report quoted State Representative Tyler Lindrum, "We had no clue they were coming. They didn't notify any of the state agents. These were products sold from Wyoming vendors to Wyoming people. In my opinion, if the FSIS didn't have the authority to inspect that food because it didn't involve interstate commerce. Of course, the agents, haven't read the Wyoming Food Freedom Act. They have to protect us from chicken chili," Lindholm said. In a telephone interview with Moody, Lindholm said the biggest part of this from a policy standpoint is that the Wyoming Food Freedom Act was written with input from FSIS. We asked if there would be any issues with federal law, and they replied back stating no. Noted Moody, the USDA's actions now make the Food Freedom Act far more than just a simple state bill intended to help Wyoming's communities and citizens thrive. It's a test case for how far the federal government will go to stomp out food freedom in an individual state, and how far states and their communities will go to protect their freedoms and the folks from government run amok. Multiple messages left with USDA offices in Colorado and Washington by WND request comment did not generate a response. At the County 17 blog, there was a report that agents demanded answers from John Thompson about his Big John's chili. Under the Wyoming Food Freedom Act, the selling of processed foods is allowed at farmers market as long as they do not contain any meat other than poultry. Thompson told agents the chicken in his chili had been purchased from a grocery store, so had already been subject to federal inspections, the report said. Thompson was told he was violating federal law and had to either throw away his food or have it confiscated. Of Easy Rocking Ranch was present and said the federal agents didn't stop there. Some of the agents got out of their car and were very threatening to me and another person standing there, saying we were intimidating federal agents. Started, the federal agents objected and called the police, who explained to them that recording the encounter was legal. Kennedy explained that the state law was adopted specifically to allow such transactions. The federal government, in a court fight several years ago over food sales direct to consumers, made plain its perspective. Quote, "There is no absolute right to consume any particular food," unquote, the government argued. I mean, I can't make this up. It looks to me like the states are going to have to go to fighting the feds. That's all there is to it, because that's why it's important when you vote in the election to check out the people that you are voting for in your state and make sure that they are going to uphold the Constitution, that they're going to stand up for the rights of the citizens in their state. The next one that we have here is off of Zero Hedge, and it says Fukushima radiation has contaminated the entire Pacific Ocean and it's going to get worse. What was the most dangerous nuclear disaster in world history? Most people would say it's Chernobyl nuclear disaster in the Ukraine, but they'd be wrong. In 2011, an earthquake believed to be an aftershock of 2010 earthquake in Chile created a tsunami that caused a meltdown at the TEPCO nuclear power plant in Japan. 3 nuclear reactors melted down, and what's happened next was the largest release of radiation into the water in the history of the world. Months, radioactive chemicals, some in even greater quantities than Chernobyl, leaked into the Pacific Ocean. However, the numbers may actually be much higher, as Japanese officials estimate, proven by several scientists to be flawed in recent years. Bad enough, Fukushima continues to leak an astounding 300 tons of radioactive waste into the Pacific Ocean every day. So indefinitely, as the source of the leak cannot be sealed, accessible to both humans and robots at high temperatures. It should come as no surprise then that Fukushima has contaminated the entire Pacific Ocean in just 5 years. Worst environmental disaster in human history, and it's almost never talked about by politicians, establishment scientists, or the news. Note that TEPCO is a partner with General Electric, also known as GE, one of the largest companies in the world, which has considerable control over numerous news corporations alike. The lack of news coverage Fukushima has received in the last 5 years, the GE knew about the poor condition of Fukushima reactors for decades and did nothing. This led 1,400 Japanese citizens to sue GE for their role in Fukushima nuclear disaster. And I will interject here, GE, if you remember just a few articles back, they're a big contributor to Hillary Clinton's campaign, and they don't pay any taxes. Can't see the radiation itself. Some parts of North America, western coast, have been feeling the effects for years. Not long after Fukushima, fish in Canada began bleeding from their gills, mouths, and eyeballs. This disease has been ignored by the government. Decimated native fish populations, including the North Pacific herring. Elsewhere in Western Canada, independent scientists have measured a 300% increase in the level of radiation. According to them, the amount of radiation in the Pacific Ocean is increasing every year. Why is this being ignored by the mainstream media? It might have something to do with the fact that U.S. and Canadian governments have banned their citizens from talking about Fukushima so people don't panic. South in Oregon, USA, starfish began losing legs and then disintegrating entirely when Fukushima radiation arrived there in 2013. Now they are dying in record amounts, putting the entire oceanic ecosystem at risk. However, government officials say Fukushima is not to blame, even though radiation in Oregon tuna tripled after Fukushima. In 2014, radiation on California's beaches increased by 500%. In response, government officials said that the radiation was coming from a mysterious unknown source and was nothing to worry about. It's having bigger impact than just the west coast of North America. Scientific now saying that the Pacific Ocean is already radioactive and is currently at least 5 to 10 times more radioactive than when the U.S. government dropped numerous nuclear bombs in the Pacific during and after World War II. If we don't start talking about Fukushima soon, we could for a very unpleasant surprise. The next one that I have is one that I warned you about on Friday. We had a chuckle about the people that's dressing up as scary clowns and chasing folks and acting foolish and, should have something better to do with their time. Line them off a whole bunch of things to do. And I said then, somebody's going to get shot doing this stuff. Well, over the weekend, guess what? This is off of Wayne TV, WordPress.com. Up here, just north of me, about an hour, Fort Wayne, Indiana, a man dressed as a clown got shot, and he is in critical condition. And this is how this reads. Fort Wayne, Indiana. Man dressed as a clown was shot in the city's south side midday on Friday. Fort Wayne police were called just after 12:30 p.m. Friday to an address at 4701 Plaza Drive near Standish Street, just south of McMillan Park, on a report of a shooting there. When police arrived, they found the man down on the sidewalk in critical condition. Fort Wayne Police Department spokesperson Michael Joyner said a white-colored SUV pulled up alongside of the clown. A man was driving. Joyner said the man got out of the car and fired several shots. The man then got back in the SUV and headed north on Plaza. This isn't the first shooting that's happened on this street, neighbor Joe Wright said. They happen often down the street. Joyner said he doesn't know why people are dressing as clowns, but said he suspects fear is a factor across the city. I just think it's crazy. People better take those clown masks off before the coroner does, Wright said. The victims' names have not been released at this time. Anyone with information is asked to call Crime Stoppers, and they give a phone number. But I mean, what did they expect? Holy smoke. So that's just the first one. You know, there'll be more if these people don't stop this. Now, the next one that I have is going to be your feel good. And I'm going to try to do a screen share on this. And this is a video off YouTube, and it's called My Message to the World. And we're going to try to do a screen share here. Minute video, so it's not going to take you all day. And we'll, whoops. Well, for some reason, it didn't do what it was supposed to do there. We'll try that again. Okay, I think it's sharing now. All right, we'll make this big and then we'll play it.
Bobby here, founder of Life Has Inside. There's been so many exciting things going on within the LVI office and getting ready for Dance for Kindness, but a few of you have been sending questions my way, and I wanted to create a video that just gives a little bit more explanation. Some of you have been asking about the song for this year and how it came about. A few months ago, I said to myself, you know, I really want to be able to create the song, actually write a song. And I remember speaking with one of the group leaders, Diana Metello in Portugal, and I said, I have no idea. I never wrote a song. I don't even know. Like, what am I going to? She goes, Orly, it's inside of you. It's what you really want to say to the world. And I didn't give it any more thought. And I'm like, I have no idea. I don't know the first thing about doing this. So anyways, I was in the shower late one night, and all of a sudden, a lyric came to me in my head. And I got out, and I said it was like midnight, and I just started typing. For like maybe, I don't know, 4 minutes straight, just typing. Went into my bed, was exhausted. 2 days later, I'm like, wait a second, didn't I write something the night, like 2 nights ago? So I took out my phone and I started reading it. And as I was reading it, it was just meant to be just a poem. It was my thoughts, my feelings at that moment. And I'm like, wow, this could be the song. And I remember calling up Diana and telling her and reading to her the poem for the very first time. And I remember the smile on her face. And the truth of the matter is, it really just, it came to me straight from above. Like, I know it's not even me. I really do. And I wanted to share with you the original poem that the song is based on. So here it goes. It's the first time really sharing this publicly. Take a stand, you and me. Forget about what the world can't see. Which of us can be strong? Stand for freedom. Stand for love. Stand for kindness from above. To open up our hearts today, put aside the pain of yesterday. The world may have begun to lose the faith in me. I won't stop standing tall, shouting loud for all to hear the call. This is our time. This is our chance to make our lives kindness enhanced. Believe in you, and if that's all you do, you'll see that the light in me is the light in you. We're all the same deep down inside. Who says our differences should make us hide? We may read from different books, have different looks, and call each other crooks. But we must get back to who we are, to see the good near and far. The good in you, the good in me, the good in all that can be. If only we could take a stand, lend each other a helping hand. Book, with every page a special hook, but together, we create a story that will resonate and give us long-awaited glory. The simple fact that you are here is proof enough to know you're dear. Look inside to who you are. Ask yourself how we got this far. Far away from what we know, the love we had hoped to grow. A world of peace, a world of love, a world of kindness from above. They say I'm crazy. I'm too naive. I'm just a kid who still believes. But I promise, if you grab my hand, trust again, and take a stand, you too will see the light that shines above the darkest night. It's not out there. It's not out here. It's in your heart that you hold dear. Take a stand. This is our chance. Unite the world through song and dance. It's not about you or me. To set free. Freedom from anger. Freedom from lust. Freedom from greed and distrust. Freedom from war. Freedom from hopes of evening the score. Freedom from fear, freedom from pain, freedom from hopelessness and shame. Freedom to give, freedom to share, freedom to hope, freedom to care. Freedom to believe, freedom to unite, freedom to end this tiring fight. Freedom to take your life back, to make it matter, to make your own new track. To build tomorrow and know we tried. We gave it our all, we didn't back down. We didn't retreat, we didn't break down. We didn't fight for the crown. That doesn't give us what we need. What we crave is a leader to lead. Let's start standing for what we know. It's time to put on our best show. And it's much longer than a song. The truth of the matter is, and I don't want to cry, that these are really, these are really the words that are inside my heart. And if I wanted to share a message with the world, it's time that we take a stand and unite this world and stand for freedom, stand for love, stand for kindness from above. This is the one message I have to give to the world. And I really do believe that in every person's heart of hearts, we all want the best world. So we've just lost our way somewhere. But if we continue to point fingers and blame others, we'll continue this terrible, terrible cycle. I'm speaking right now because I'm getting a little bit emotional. When these words came, I'm telling you, I sat down in one shot. I know that this was not me. I know. It really honestly came from a different place. And I'm honored to be able to share with you guys, and I can't wait for you guys to hear. So if you have any questions or you want to share your comments or feedback for what you hope for a better world, and I know that will make a tremendous, tremendous difference. I know that there's a lot of people speaking about a lot of the negative going on in the world right now. Continue to believe, continue to trust in the goodness of people. Continue to believe in your goodness and let it shine through. All right, guys.
Okay, there we have that. We're fighting for freedom. My goodness gracious. After everything that has gone on, the government just keeps chiseling away at our rights, chiseling away at our freedom. And that's what we have to stand up for, is our freedom. And when you go to the polls, early registration is going to be opening, or early voting is going to be opening up here in another 10 days in Indiana. I don't know about where you are, but the polls are soon going to be open. And when you go vote, please educate yourselves. Please make sure that you're voting for somebody who is going to stand for your freedom and not be somebody that's going to try to take your freedoms away from you. We've had too many of our freedoms removed as it is, so that's something to keep in mind. And with that, I think I'm going to cut y'all loose for today, and I hope that you'll go out and stick your feet down in the grass, kick off them shoes, curl the toes up in the grass, and balance yourself. Take a deep breath of fresh air, and be glad you woke up above ground this morning. Somebody today. And if you like the video, give it a thumbs up, share it around, let people know what we're doing here, because we're trying to bring them the news and trying to educate folks. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Bye.